So I recently won a Catan national qualifier at Anime Los Angeles. Now that was so much fun. I love Anime Los Angeles. It's my favorite convention of the year, and to be able to just have that engagement with fellow players, fellow anime enthusiasts was super fun. Now the year before at the LAA, the Catan national qualifiers were super packed. There was probably like 30 plus people, if not 40 or so, of just so many people trying to compete. Now, that was because the structure was a 1 day tournament. Now, this time around, what they did was for the preliminary events, they made it Thursday, Friday. You had to win or get to the top X amount of people from those days to then go into the finals. Now, that means people couldn't just buy a day pass, they would have to buy, multiple days to be able to make it into the final tournament. So this time around, the tournament was actually less people. So instead of like the 30, 40 people, we probably saw a good like 20-ish throughout the 2 days. Now, one of the things I really enjoyed about the tournament is because the structure was really well done. Now, preliminary first day, I come Thursday, play the Catan event. There's not enough for us, and we all just make it to the finals, which is fine. Preliminary wise, I think that game I got second. First place was probably Thomas, who's super good player. I see him at a lot of Catan events. He does like the local events as well. I don't really do local meetups just because Catan's such a stressful game, and I think it's a lot of fun, but like it's one of those games where I'm down to play it like a big event once per year type thing, if not twice. Anyways, the second day comes, and I'm like, there's nothing. I mean, there's other stuff to do, but I just want to play again to win some more prize tickets. So that at the ALA, you win prize tickets for winning tournaments, and you can redeem those for like board games and etc. So I play the second day, or we're matched with other players, and I think from there, I believe I got. I'm trying to recall exactly. I think I won my game that day, and it was a steamroll because I just had a lot of points. I think it was I had 10. Next person after me had like 5, and then someone else was 4, and another person was 4. So that was super good. No, actually, another person had 6. So 10, 6, 5, 4, or something like that. So I had enough points, but we realized, when we got to the second round, everyone in that final table just had enough points, so they kind of just all put us to the finals anyways. And I got extra prize tickets. And I met a lot of cool people along the way. I met an individual named Chase, who was actually a really good local player as well. Very understands the fundamental of the game. Now, I mentioned Thomas and Chase because they're going to come back later. In my first game, though, that day, I played against someone called Austin as well, who's really smart. And unfortunately, one of the positions that I needed, I was able to get, and it was super easy because I went first, and then like the last position. Oh no, I went second, and the last position I got, even though Austin had a really good spot, was just so good. I was surprised the person right before me didn't take it. So that just helped me steamroll the game because I had every resource I needed. I had a lot of good numbers. Like my lowest number was 4. That's how crazy it was. I kind of felt bad, but all those people, the people that wanted to play, ended up making it to the finals anyways. So we're on the final day, right? And we are competing against a few good players. Now there's Thomas, there's Chase, and there's Austin. Chase, I briefly played on the second day because he was also in the final table on the second preliminary day. But we realized there was other people too. I think it was Chase, this other gentleman, and Cassandra, and this guy dressed up as Perfect Cell, who I've known. He's a really good player. He won the qualifiers last year. Now, from there, we realized we were going to be fine. And we played a quick game, which was super fun, and it really came down to the wire. But super fun game. Now, we come to the final day, and I am like, all right, let's get this going. First game I play, I ended up winning, and that was against, I'm trying to recall, I think Austin was in there again, and there was 2 other individuals. Now, I had a good positioning. I set up my board really well, and it was just one of those games where just my rolls just kept getting hit, so that was fine. Second game comes around, and I'm now facing Chase, and I believe other people, Chase and 2 ladies. Now, that game was interesting because it was kind of cutting it close. I know that the negotiations in that game was kind of rough, and one of the things that we noticed was, I had a port option at the top that was racing against another player, and I just so happened to like have enough resources to trade. So Chase needed a resource. He offered to the other person because they were right after me. But the other person only had 2 resources anyway, so they didn't have enough for a settlement. So I traded because I had enough, and I got everything I needed. So from that port build, I was able to then just kind of steamroll out and like build out the game. So that was the second game. Now Chase doesn't score high, but he's still in the runnings. Now final game comes in. The third game, oh, no, final games before the final game. Third game, I am seeing Austin. I'm seeing Thomas. I'm trying to recall who else I saw, but I think it was just us three and another individual. I'm trying to recall exactly because this was a few days ago, like last week. But ultimately, that particular game, and it was the third game, I was pretty secure because I had 20 points to that point. There were still a lot of individuals, with decent amount of points, but I believe Austin scored high. He won his last game. Thomas scored high like normal. And there was a fourth player, I believe another individual. So we played. I'm trying to recall the exact turn order, but I think Thomas was not favored in his pick order. Me having won 2 games, I had a really good favoritism in terms of my order. But I remember playing some units down and just kind of steamrolling. So, okay, let's just say that. Third game, I ended up winning. And that was nice because I had 30 points leading up to the final game. Now, we weren't sure if the game was supposed to be top gut or if it was just going to be the final game and whatever happens. There was some conversations going around because I know some people talked about it's never the top cut. It's always final table. The way they set up the tournament, I felt was so smooth. And of course, if it was just points out of 4 games, then yeah, I'd be way favored because I have 30 points. I just need to score the second place had 26 points. So I literally needed to score X amount. No, they might even less than that. So if they're 26, they can get 10 to 36. No, they were probably less than that actually. I think they were 25 or 4. 24, I think. So I only needed to score 5 points to win if that was top cut. But we decided, you know what? The prizing was going to be Nat's invite for the final winner, and it's going to be a ALA ticket for next year. And, the tournament organizers were kind of, uncertain exactly how they should do it. At this point, the other people, of course, wanted to hey, let's final table. It's always final table. They conferred with a friend. So I found the solution. I was like, hey, how about this? Let's make the ALA. If I can guarantee the ALA ticket for next year, then let's just make the final table. Everyone agreed. Everyone was happy for that because we're all competing for the Nats qualifier. And that's what really mattered at the end of the day. Now, I love ALA, so I really wanted to come back every year. I'm going to go there every single year for the rest of my life, hopefully. But we were able to agree on that. And of course, our seat orders were already arranged. I was first. Austin was second. Thomas was third. And Chase was fourth. Now, this was because of our points from throughout the tournament. I being a perfect scorer. Austin right behind me. Of course, he was also in my first game where he actually did not get that many points. But his second game he won, and the third game I think he was kind of lower. So his point score was kind of 24-ish, 25, and then I think Thomas was 23 and Chase was 22. Those scores were enough to get to the final table. So being in the first position, I immediately go for an ore section on the top left. Now, this map that we had, and I wish I took a picture of this, was so low on ore. So I put a spot on the ore, sheep, and wheat. That gives me a developmental card, that gives me a city, that gives me a lot of options. Now, the other people following me decided, okay, initially they were going to all gang up on me because they knew he's, if it's points based, we need to make sure he does not get any points. But once we agreed to having it the structure where it's final table, which it should, it ended up being the final table route, they decided to kind of lay it around. So I was close to a wheat port, I think on the top left, or a certain port. But another individual goes to the left of me. That's fine. And then Austin goes to the left. Thomas, I believe, goes to the top. And Chase goes to the right. Now, Chase had a very good strategy where he kind of built in the middle. But those areas were kind of a little weaker numbers. But he didn't really have that many options. Now, what happened was, though, by the time it went back to me, after Chase was talking to Thomas about, what are some good positions, we got to work together because first and second have really good positioning. Thomas ended up picking a nice spot. Austin was torn between a brick, wood, and I believe a wheat section versus the top where it'll be another ore, wheat, and something else. Now, he was convinced out of the brick area, which was so good for me because I wanted every resource. So they ended up going top, and I ended up going to the bottom, which was, a very weak wood. I think it was a 12 wood, but a brick with 4 or 5, and then wheat for like 3. That was good for me because I needed as many resources as I can, and I don't mind it. I get to start with a brick, wood, and a wheat, which is good for settlements. Now, what happened on the top left though is was not completely blocked off. I had nowhere to go. So from there, I decided, okay, I have to either clutch up a settlement to get to my ports on the bottom right for a 3-to-1, or I need to just build out, actually work around what I'm given, because I can't build a port on the top left, even though someone went out of their way to block my port. Like they went to the 2-spot zone. So I decided to just roll it out. The game continues. They're kind of blocking me a lot. I'm getting knighted. And, I realize, okay, even though I have these nice positions, I'm being blocked, and that's fine. I'm expecting that. We go through the game. I think Chase is getting a hotel. Thomas is getting a hotel. Austin and I are kind of struggling. So we're kind of like, we're intertwined in our positions. So we realize, okay, we kind of could work together a little bit more. So we're seeing the knight go from me all the time, kind of move towards Chase a little, towards Thomas a little. Now, I was at a point where a lot of the positions that Austin needed, Austin was structured around an ore point. He had so much invested in ore, but it kept getting blocked. So his development was not working. Thomas had a really good spread. He had a very long road with a lot of settlements in between, and Chase was structured around developmental cards. Now, I was still struggling. I was close enough to a brick port that I realized, okay, let's build what we can and kind of aim towards that. So the brick that I initially landed on, I kind of centered around that. There was a point where the game where Thomas actually went ahead. He had the longest road and he had a lot of points. He had a lot of settlements out there. I kind of used some, I kind of addressed the table like, oh, this is great because now we have a new target. That's not me. So they started attacking Thomas, which is great for me because even though I was behind in points, I had such good positioning and resources available that I thought it was a great time to attack. So what comes around is I build my hotel. I'm super glad. I was trying to build my first hotel and I tried to trade for an ore, but no one would trade with me. So I decided, okay, I offered a 1-for-1 for an ore. They disagreed. They wouldn't accept. So I used my monopoly. I did it the clean way. I could have just traded for something else to give them stuff and then take that all back anyways. But I just needed the ores and no one would trade with me. So I still ended up taking it. I built my first city, which is great. And this is on my sheep, wheat, and ores position. So that any of those get rolled, I get 2-for-1. We see the game progress. And of course, Thomas is really killing it. Everyone else is building it. Chase, I think, has like 7 developmental cards. We know a lot of them are victory points. Austin's kind of struggling, but he's kind of slowly trying to catch up. It's still not looking good because his ores are just not getting hit and the knights are constantly on us. So we realize we come to the point where like, okay, if we need to do this, it's got to be now. So kind of like try to stop Thomas from getting longest road. There was a point where I could take his longest road for like 1 turn, but not for long because he had like 3 on the other side and like 5 on one side. So he just needed 1 road to connect it. I was trying to get someone to trade with me heavily to beat his longest road, but they were kind of uncertain because if they did give me longest road at one point, and at this point I had my brick port connected. I had 2 hotels. Like I had a hotels on my brick area. So I can kind of use that to like build out these cities or developmental cards, etc. So Chase asked me like, hey, I need to know what's in your hand before I give you this. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to go that far. So I just build my settlement, which shows that if I did get like crazy amount of longest road and built that settlement, I would have been at 10 because I would have been 2 + 1. So I'm at 7, right? So I built the settlement. I'm at 8. And, Thomas at this point, even though he was such in the lead, he was being stolen so often that he didn't have any resources to build out his final like few points. So Chase is still like, he was trying to convince us to give him developmental cards, but we were just like, hey, you're also really dangerous. And it came to a point where I was just like a few turns away at this point because I built my hotel on the top left, which I couldn't build anymore because I was completely blocked. The bottom is where I built like, the connectors to the ports, build my settlements, and then build these hotels. Eventually, I was at a point where I had 3 hotels around this one brick area. So that's 6 points, 8 on the top, and I had 1 settlement. So I'm 1 point away from winning. And everyone's like freaking out. Chase, turns out, did not have any more knights to put on me. They didn't have the monopolies. But by the time, that turn came around, I purchased a developmental card the turn before, and it turned out to be a year of plenty. So everyone kind of took their turn. Thomas did not have enough points. Austin was kind of lacking in like resources as well. They weren't just their ore strategy wasn't working, Comes to Chase. Chase is like, he's trying to build something, but he doesn't have enough resources because I've been knighting them as well. And when it's my turn, I finally use my. I have my road connected for my settlement. I think I just needed one more road and a settlement. So I had the whole bottom right area for myself pretty much. So I used the settlement year plenty to get two resources and then build out my final settlement. Now that's also because the 9 was rolled. I believe, yeah, the 9 was for my brick. So that kind of came through clutch for me, and that was so close because Chase had 9 points, Thomas had like 8 or 9 points, and Austin was close at like 8. So this was such a close game. It wasn't until the very end where I ended up like having enough to build out, and I was just like so thankful. That's the scary thing about getting longest road. You become a target, once you get that X point, even though, it doesn't make you necessarily the scariest threat. There's times where people are just going to be like, okay, we can't trade with you. So it went from me being targeted, being blocked, and being knighted constantly to clutching through because the resources came through and I just used that momentum to barely squeeze the win. So that ended my Catan National Qualifier event. That was 3 days of Catan. Last day, we got 4 games in, perfect score of 40 points. 4 games, 410 points. And that was so much fun. I was so glad. I really like Catan, and these were some really good players. I was just very fortunate that my placings were doing very well. That also helped me with my positioning, and like I think with some of the games, I got very fortunate. This means I got my ALA ticket for next year, and I also got my invite for national qualifiers for Catan. And that's a lot of fun for me, and I love board games. I attend a lot of them, and I just thought I'd share that story with you guys of how I got my Catan invites and how we got the perfect score. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this content. We're going to try to make more content out there. Very random stuff, kind of like IRL stuff. I should have taken more photos the day of, but I know that's kind of frowned down upon. In the meantime, I hope you guys check it out, and thank you so much. I'll let you guys know when and if I make it to the nationals for Catan, but that'll be super cool.